Hello, all. Welcome to another session of International Business. And today we would be discussing globalization and world economy, the economic development as per globalization. First is what, why, and how of globalization. We have discussed globalization in some sense, but have you ever noticed that how close the different nations of the world are in this era? If you visit a superstore in India, you will find all commodities imported from other countries. Only some commodities are there that are actually manufactured in India. You'll find the electronic items made in Malaysia or mobile phones made in China, food items, rice, cotton imported from Bangladesh, Pakistan. So this situation is not only limited to India only, but the whole world is facing the same scenario. Volume of goods, services, and investments is transferring the national borders very, very rapidly. Nowadays, approximately $1.5 billion of foreign exchange transactions are taking place daily. And statistics also shows that approximately 8.9 trillion of goods are transacted across borders and $2.10 trillion of services are provided across the border. So, as we are concerned with globalization, it is not a new concept. In past, people used to travel to other places for gaining control on other lands and for finding out the better living style or finding out the new places and to earn profits by selling in different regions. Now these activities were carried out even thousands of years before, but it is said that earliest from globalization was started from Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Babylonian empires. In the regime of Mongols, the famous Silk Road connected to Central Asia and Europe actually was is a very good example of globalization. Globalization, as I've told you, statistics indicates that globalization is expanding very rapidly worldwide. Data gathered from WTO shows that economies of the world is expanding since 1950. Until 2004, the volume of merchandise trade is expanded about 7.5 times. Now, as far as definition of globalization is concerned, it is still a controversial topic. Why? Because there is no consensus on a single definition because globalization touches all disciplines of life, right? Economics, for example, focuses on transfer of goods, services, and funds in overall world. Political science focuses on the role of United Nations organization, that is UNO, WTO, GATT, and similar kind of international institutions. Some other disciplines such as anthropology and sociology concentrate on the interconnectivity of different cultures. So basically, we can say globalization can be applied is a movement, a phenomenon, and a force. And the scope of globalization is increasing as the time is also passing. One most common definition of globalization states that globalization is a process of integrating different world economies. Right. So, globalization is integration among people, governments, companies of different countries. Now, globalization is refers to political, economical, social, and technological links in different countries, also by Hamilton and Webster. And globalization is a contested concept that refers to shrinkage of time and space. The examples of globalization are eBay and Amazon, McDonald's and Netflix, and so on. Now we come to economic development, right? So, how the globalization is affecting the economic development of the world. So, the concept of economic development actually refers to the process of improvement in the economic opportunities and quality of human lives and a reduction in poverty. Better health facilities, better education, clean environment, and better utilization of resources are the important components of economic development. Moreover, the justified distribution of goods and services is also the part of economic development. A good distribution network that includes the good transportation system results not only in better delivery of goods and services but the improvement of labor's mobility as well. Now, economic development is actually a field of economics which is related to the process of development. It is not only focuses on ways of enhancing structural changes and economic growth, but also improving the potential of the mass of the population. Now, for example, through education, health, and workplace conditions, uh, so what has happened is globalization has changed the picture of world economy by increasing the cross-border trade, exchange of currency, free flow of capital, movement of people, and flow of information. All these have been the characteristics of globalization. Now, globalization has introduced this concept of borderless and integrated world economy. Globalization has given a new thought to the business worldwide. A lot of strategic changes have been occurred in the business. Now, target market for business is not only their homeland but the overall world. So, world economy is also composed of many sectors. So, globalization has affected each sector of world economy directly or indirectly. So, we can focus here on the major sectors of world economy where the economic development has happened. Now, according to the traditional view, economic development refers to the economic system that might be a mean to increase the absolute size of, for instance, capital or annual production, regardless to the size of population. But in the modern sense, economic development is used in relation to the movement in real income per head and to the potential in this respect, according to Robbins. Now, economic development actually comes in different steps. Uh, how are we going to relate it to the globalization, right? Actually, a lot of work has been done in the past on globalization, but its effects on the economic development have to be discussed in detail. As we've seen, globalization is integration of all the economies. So, economic development is actually, it refers to the improvements in the quality of human life, right? uh, Now, what are the stages? There are 5 steps. Economic developments comes in 5 steps according to American Economic Grosto. Economic development comes in 5 steps. The first step is traditional stage. In this kind of stage are exchanged as in barter system. Agriculture is considered the major sector and resources are regulated through the different ways of production. Then the second stage is transitional stage. Now in this stage surplus production is generated, so transport infrastructure get advanced and trading activates boost up. Third is takeoff stage. In this stage, industrialization sector starts growing and at the same time political and social institutions get strengthened. Next is drive to maturity stage. At this stage, investment opportunities are increased along with technological advancements. And then comes the last stage, and that is high mass consumption stage. At this stage, industries are more authoritative and customer focused. Now, we can actually utilize the number of economic indicators to measure the economic development of a country or whole world. Some of the major economic indicators of performance indicators are, the first is GDP, that is the gross domestic product. What is that? It is the total value of goods and services produced in a country. The second is gross national product, GNP, which is market value of all products and services produced in a year by the residents and the local labor. Then per capita income. What is that? Aggregate of all sources of income divided by the size of population. Now these are the major economic development. Now, how globalization is affecting the world economic development. The effects of globalization can be discussed in the following different ways. The first is global markets. Now, according to Hill, the global market refers to the merging of historically distinct and separate national markets into one huge global marketplace. With the explanation of global markets, liberalize the economic activities of exchange of goods, services, and funds. Removal of cross-border trade barriers has made formation of global markets much more feasible. Then the international institutions. Some of the forces in the world are in the favor of a government that governs the entire world. Now, the institutions like United Nations Organization, that is UNO, IMF, International Monetary Fund, World Trade Organization, and World Bank, are near to the concepts of those groups. They are regulating the relationship between different countries and governing issues of justice, human relations, or political factors. As the primary purpose of WTO is to unionize the world trading system, now till 2005, 148 countries were the members of WTO. The primary purpose of International Monetary Fund, that is IMF, is to regulate the world monetary system. United Nations Organization's primary purpose to bring the peace in all over the world, and about 191 countries are the members of UNO. Next is changes in the world trade picture. Before the phase of globalization, United States of America was dominant in world export. After the advent of globalization, Germany, Japan, South Korea, and China have seriously challenged the position of America. Changes in foreign direct investment. What is foreign direct investment? It is the investment from the foreign entities directly into the country. Now, foreign direct investment is considered as a significant indicator of economic development. According to Salvatore, investment in form of lands, capital good, inventories, and factories are the real investments because they are in the real assets. Now, direct investment is in shape of when one firm is controlling a firm or establishing a subsidiary. Foreign direct investment must be strong enough to control parent company and foreign host company. Control means that parent firm must own at least 10% stock of the subsidiary. Lower than this limit of shares are considered as portfolio investment. So, the next is corporation changes. In the present global competitive environment, it is it is necessary to use the information technology innovatively and skillfully. Globalization has increased the trend of multinational companies in all over the world. Before the globalization phase, USA was dominant in multinational companies. But after the expansion of globalization trend, many different nations entered in the race of multinational corporations. In 1973, share of US in MNCs was about 48.5%, and in 2002 it came down to 28%. Technological effects by the development of technologies specifically related to telecom as internet, telephones, wireless technologies, undersea fibers, a global technological infrastructure has been developed so information can be moved more smoothly across the borders. Laws regarding copyrights, patents, and international agreements can be easily applied onto that. Through information technology, awareness and application of criminal laws have become easier. Frauds in international trade and in society can be easily detected through information technology. Now, effects on the standard of living. As we've mentioned, that the major effect of globalization is in the shape of expansion of trade and investment. It is evident that poverty rate has decreased in the regions where investment and trade is expanding. If we consider different examples of different countries, then we can prove our point of view. For example, India is a country where the FDI or foreign direct investment is increasing rapidly, and as a result, poverty rate is declining. Mexico has overcome the macroeconomic crisis better than its neighbors. Similarly, Zambia, Colombia, and Poland have gained a lot by falling of prices because of the globalization. Next is effect on employment. After the advent of globalization, it was an apprehension that the job will shift to developing countries from developed and advanced countries. But the supporters argue that this shift will result in the long term benefit to the country. Critics argue that globalization will result in inequalities and insecurity about the jobs and will ultimately cause the changes in employment structure and labor demand is going to fall. Now, as the labor is cheaper in the developing countries, hence the demand of labor there is higher. But in the long run, nothing sustains the prices, and the cost of labor will come to an equilibrium, and this advantage to developing countries is going to go. But it is all the story of the long run. Then industrial effects. Globalization has also affected the industrial sector of the world. Now, in this era of globalization, the focus of industries is to produce foreign commodities and to facilitate the consumers in all over the world. For example, Coca Cola produces the beverages according to the taste that is acceptable in all over the world, right? So, the globalization is actually focusing on there are industrial effects on the globalization as well. Then, cultural change. Through the development of globalization, world is getting into an identical culture that is understood by every nation. We may call it intermixing of the cultures also. People of the world, especially people of rich countries, are getting less conscious about their nation's culture and they have started emerging in world culture. Globalization has resulted in increasing the diversity and boosting telecom and tourism sector of the world. So we can see that now we know the Japanese way of wishing and the shake hand of the European and English countries, namaste of our India. So all these are greeting ways. That's the culture, and everybody understands that culture, and thanks to globalization for that. Also, we know Pilates, we know other forms of exercises, hip hop, aerobics, and yoga also. So people all over the world understands each other's herbs, medicines, ways of keeping healthy in terms of yoga, meditation, exercises of different kinds. So it's an intermixing of the culture that is taking place. Then environmental effects. On one hand, globalization has resulted in making the man more interested towards its planet in which he is living and its ecology, that is, its environment through the technological advancements. But on the other hand, it is considered that with the growth of transport, that has resulted in destruction of ozone layer and many species on the earth. For the economic development, every country has to pass from the dirty stage of industrialization, which actually results in the extraction of poisonous materials and harmful wastes that are dangerous for the human health. And when this poisonous material goes into the earth or in the water, it contaminates them. It makes it hazardous for other species as well. But it is considered that these things are necessary to come along with the developments in living standards of human beings. In spite of all these adverse facts, globalization has become an unavoidable necessity for economic development. So these has been the problems with globalization. So there have been environmental effects, but there are welcome changes like cultural changes and industrial effects. So it has been, the globalization has been a mixed pie for us. It has brought many good things, but it has attracted few undesirable results as well. Now, what are the positive impact of economic globalization? Let's pinpoint it. The first is, there has been multinational organizations due to the result of globalization, right? Multinational organizations, they often see as the drivers of globalization. They are beneficiaries but also facilitators of economic globalization. Their role is also highly controversial, but as 80% of international trade is connected to at least one of multinational organization, it is evident that they are driven by profit. Their responsibility has to be investigated further. As being the largest players in international trade, there have been several attempts to create more social justice, like fair trade and anti sweatshops, etc. So it is the multinational organizations that they have been the result of globalization. They have actually integrated the entire market, but they are driven by profit, and hence their intentions to for the country in which they are operating, it has to be checked. Next is access to new markets. The positive impact of new markets was partly elaborated in our previous lecture. The theoretically, access to new markets is mutually beneficial. As trade is voluntary, when people buy products, both seller and consumers are better off once the deal is conducted. Developing and developed countries can benefit equally from the minimal restrictions on trade. However, their vulnerability to change is very different. End users of the product. Now, globalization increases possible consumer choices to almost an infinite number. So, you will have various kinds of products, diversity in the products in consumerist society. Now, the demand for cheaper products is so incisive that in intense competition, even cents would count. Through globalization, consumers not only receive cheaper prices, but quality not unquestionably valid for all products, and range of products offered is also improved. So the consumers are going to get various product range. So there is a wide product range at minimum prices, which is very good for a consumer. What are the negative impact of economic globalization? So far, we have seen all the positives of economic globalization, but what are the problems with it? So the first is capital flight or tax havens. Now, what's that? It is not only physical borders that are disappearing as consequence of globalization. Financial institutes are also becoming interconnected. The movement of money is no longer subject to restrictions, which certainly increases global business opportunities. But at the same time, it makes domestic economies more vulnerable with regard to globalization. It occurs when autonomous countries are discussed, or they are stretched wide open. The fact that today we are still taking of distinct countries shows how globalization has a long way to go. While the European Union has attempted to centralize most of the legislative functions, countries still retain relatively high levels of autonomy. If globalization was fully implemented and the world was 100% integrated, acting as one activity, this negative impact could be disregarded, but it is not so, right? So there are few countries which are distinct, there are few countries which are collaborating. Now, whenever massive money movement takes place, one system, that is one country, benefits more than the other. The country experiencing liquidity crisis, let's say, or the tax capital flight. For instance, tax regulations imposed in any country encourage people to withdraw their savings and deposit their money in other countries where taxation is less severe. Because of globalization, this can be done merely by a click of computer or through a call to a broker. And billions can be withdrawn from a national economy in a split second. And it can actually jeopardize the stability of economy of that country, right? Now, this excessive capital withdrawal from countries has had a severe impact on the economies of many countries like Greece, United Kingdom, and even in US report billions of dollars worth of illicit financial flows. So the financial crisis of 2008, also known as global financial crisis, which happened, it affected the entire world. The growth in cross financial operations and opening the entire world as a financial market yielded massive growth, but it all came to an end. While the development of the crisis and its scope cannot be totally attributed to globalization, but globalization actually made it more vulnerable. The global scale of crisis was actually a result of globalization, otherwise, it would have been refined to few countries. With financial institutions so interconnected, the failure of Lehman Brothers plunged the entire world economy into a depression which could have been saved. Another negative impact of economic globalization is increase in economic imbalances. It has been widely cited that Western enterprises abuse developing countries and are only interested in making a profit or finding a cheaper means of production, investing only in a small fraction of profit back into the country where they are established. In the short term, foreign organizations can provide employment, but once they leave, the situation reverts to the pre investment levels. The issue can be examined on a micro and a macro level. China, becoming one of the most prominent global economy players, has actually increased its wealth substantially and claims to be the main producer in many industries. The gap between the richest and poorest countries has also widened since globalization, and African nations have failed to capitalize on globalization, despite the effects of globalization being usually reported in a favorable light. So, it is that you have to tap those advantages. China is able to do it, but other countries failed, and hence there are economic imbalances in the world. These are the references we've used in this current presentation. Thank you for listening.